We begin today the Gemara at the bottom of Daf, Lamed Chesam with Beis, Toshama, 2 lines from the bottom of the Yamud. The Gemara before brought the halacha that Rabba said in the name of Rav that a master that's maktish his slave, his Eved Kanani, to hektish, it doesn't take effect. His words do not really mean that it becomes hektish. Why not? Because you can't be maktish the body of the slave itself to be a carbon or to be used for building something in the Beis HaMikdash. So the only thing that you would maybe be able to say that the master meant, he meant to say that my slave should become hektish, but not his physical body itself, the value of his body. And you have this, Rashi says, you find this b'chlal, when a person can be maktish anything to hektish. He can give a property to hektish, he can give behemoths that are not even kosher to hektish. What does hektish do with it? The value of it belongs to hektish, and hektish sells it, and then they use the money for what they need. But Rav said that no, that's not the case with an Eved. By an Eved, because the person said he's being maktish as Eved, he didn't say that he's being maktish the money of the Eved, so therefore we say what he really meant to say is that this Eved should be free and he should become part of the Am Kodesh. He should become a Yid, he should become part of the holy nation. But the term hektish that he uses does not really mean hektish. That's what Rav said. So the Gemara is going to ask from a Braisa that seems to clearly say the opposite. Toshema, so the Gemara says, come, let's see what it says here in this Braisa. Maktish Avdoi, a person that's maktish is Eved. So the master gave up the Eved to hektish. What happens? Even though he gave him up to hektish, but oise ve'oichel. The Eved himself could still work and use the income of his work for himself, for food, for parnasa that he needs. Why? Shaloi hiktish elodoma. Because when the master is maktish him, he can't be maktish the physical body itself. As I mentioned, the physical body cannot be brought as a carbon or anything like that. So therefore, what's the hektish for? The hektish is for his value. That now Bezdin will sell him to take the money, his value. So here we clearly see that when a person is maktish and Eved, the hektish does take effect for the value of the money. Not like Rabbi said before in the name of Rav, that it does not take effect. And all that happens is, he becomes part of the Am Kodesh. His master was really just freeing him. So the Gemara answers, Homani Rab Meir. Who is this Braisa going according to? It's following the opinion of Rab Meir. So this Braisa Taka holds that he will become hektish, but it's only according to Rab Meir. What's the unique opinion of Rab Meir? The Omar Rab Meir says, Ein adam moitzi dvarav levatala. Rab Meir's rule is a person, when he says words, he doesn't say words for nothing. You have to look into the words and interpret what he means that has some meaning. It's not just for nothing. The example that Rab Meir is speaking about is regarding a person, there's the halacha of erchen. There's different ages. When you say, I take upon myself to give the value of this individual to hektish, it will depend on his age, how much money you have to give to hektish. What's the youngest age? A ben chaydish, a 30-year-old baby. That's that has a value to give to hektish. So if a person says, I will give the value of this baby, and the baby is not even 30 days old yet, so then in the halacha of erchen, you've said nothing. Your words are meaningless. But Rav Meir says, even though the halacha of erchen does not apply, but you still have to give the value of that baby to hektish, not in the measurement of erchen, but the domim. You have to give the value of that baby to hektish. Because why? Because we have a rule, a person is not going to say something for nothing. So therefore his words mean something. So the same thing over here, Rashi explains, when a person says, this Eved should be hektish, the term hektish means hektish. It usually means belonging to hektish in the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, Rav Meir holds, we're not going to interpret that the master used this term hektish for no reason. And he really sort of meant something else. He really just meant that he's becoming a part of the Am Kodesh. No, there's a meaning to the word hektish. What's the meaning of the word hektish? That he becomes part of hektish for his domim, for his value, even if it's not for mamish's physical guf. So that's this Braisa, Rav Meir. Says the Gemara, Hochanami Mistavre. It's logical to say that this Braisa goes according to Rav Meir. Because the Ktani Seifa, and the Seifa of the Braisa continues and says, V'chein hu shehiktish atzmai. A person that says about himself, I'm being maktish myself to hektish. Could a person be maktish his body to hektish? That his physical body belongs to hektish? No. So therefore the Braisa says, that regarding a person himself, the same thing. Oise v'oichel, that the person will work and he can eat from his work that he does, because his physical body still belongs to himself. Similar to the Eved himself. Shlahiktish ela domov. He was only maktish the value of himself for hektish. So now the question is, what does it mean shlahiktish ela domov? Says the Gemara, if you're going to say that this entire Braisa follows Rab Meir, so shapir. So then it makes sense. What does Rab Meir say? Rab Meir says when a person says hektish, he must have meant something. So even though he didn't clearly say that what he's doing is that he wants to give the value of himself or the value of his eved to hektish, but that's what he must have meant. And therefore we say that whether he says it about his own body, whether he says it about the body of his eved, it becomes hektish. But if you're going to say that the Brais over here follows the opinion of the Rabbanon, so then what would be the pshat over here according to the Rabbanon? If we were to say that Rabbanon holds that this person becomes hektish, as the Gemara wanted to say in the beginning, what was the Gemara trying to say in the beginning? Not that we interpret that when he said hektish, he must have meant the value of himself or the value of his evet that goes to hektish. He meant that I should be hektish or my evet should be hektish. That's what it means. And we're going to say that what happens now is that his body becomes hektish, his eved becomes hektish. Elamai, for what? Not to bring the eved as a carbon on the mizbeach. You can't. The eved himself, his body belongs to hektish. His own body belongs to hektish. And what does hektish do with him or with his eved? Hektish will sell it. Hektish will sell the eved in order to make money off of it. That's what the pshat would have been according to the Rabbanah. Says the Gemara, that can't be pshat in this braisa. Because Bishlema Avdai Lidmeikoi. Yeah, Eved, you could say such a thing that when he says that his Eved should be hektish, so the Eved himself becomes hektish, and now what could Bezdin do with the Eved? They sell the Eved, they make money off of him. Eloiu Lidmeikoi, but the person himself, could you say that the person himself becomes hektish? And what's Bezdin going to do with his body? Bezdin's going to sell him. A Yid is made to sell. A Yid belongs to hektish, and then a Yid is being sold. There's no such a thing, B'chlal. So therefore the Gemara says, it must be Ella Iyu Lidmei Koi. The person himself, he never meant to say that I should be hektish. We're following Rav Meir's opinion. And what Rav Meir says is, when a person said hektish, because his body himself cannot be brought on the mizbeach, the body of the eved cannot be brought on the mizbeach, the term hektish that he said didn't mean Bechlal himself. It meant the value of what I'm worth, that's what I'm going to give to hektish. So therefore he doesn't belong to hektish, his eved doesn't belong to hektish, it's just the value, the money that belongs to hektish. And that could be both by himself and by the eved.
What's the difference in the part between the Rameh and the Rabbanan?
What do you mean? Again, according
the Rabbanan also says
no, it's a difference. So let me try to crystallize this again. So the difference over here is, according to the Rabbanon, if we're going to say that when a person says I am hektish or my eved is hektish, it takes effect. What that would mean is my body becomes hektish. Elamai, I can't use your body itself as a carbon or to build into the mizbeach or to the Beis Hamikdash. So I use the money of the person. I sell. Exactly. The point that the person was saying is I taka belong to hektish. What could hektish do with me? Sell me. Mashenkin, according to Rav Meir, because the person cannot be brought on the mizbeach as a carbon, when he said hektish, he's not being Maitzi Dvarav Lovatala. He didn't mean Bechlal his body. Well, he was just using his body as an example to give a certain value to Hektish. My body is worth $10,000. So he meant to say, I'm going to donate to Hektish $10,000. So it's not him Bechlal. You don't have to sell his body Bechlal. That, the Gemara here is saying, applies whether to him, whether to the Eved. Even though he can't be sold like an Eved, but the value is the same thing. That's the difference. Okay, let's see the next piece of it. Shall we say that this Vart of Rav, when a person is makdish as eved, what happens? Does he actually become hektish or not? Shall we say this is a machlokes tanoim? Hamakdish avdai ein moyelim bay. So the Brisa says when a person is makdish his eved, so then there's no meila. Anything that's hektish, so if you misuse it for yourself, so this is the isser of meila, where you have to pay it back with a chaimish and you have to bring a carbon for it. But if it's your eved that you were makdish, there's no meila. There is mila, but here he says you mile where in the hairs of this eved. The Gemara will soon explain specifically why hairs. But at this point, it seems like there's a machlokes here when you're makdish, you eved, whether there's meila or not. So the Gemara says, "My love, don't you think bahaka miflagi?" They're arguing the point that we spoke about before. The Marsava Kodesh. Rav Shimon Gamliel is saying that when you are makdish an eved, he becomes hektish. It does take effect. And true that they can't bring him as a carbon, but they can sell the eved. So hektish has this eved. So if you use the eved, so you're being mile. Umar savaloi kodesh. But the Tanakhama says when you makdish a eved, the hektish does not take effect. So therefore, there's no meila over here. That's what it seems like their argument is. So the Gemara says that can't be the explanation for this machlokes. But Tizbura, is it logical to say that this is what the Brisa here is saying? Hi, moyelim by ve'im moyelim by. So then why does the Brisa say that they're arguing whether the halacha of meila applies over here? Hi, kodesh ve'ene kodesh mibayele. The question over here, is it Bechlal Hektish or not? Me'ila is a result of the halacha, whether it's Hektish or not. It should have said directly, is it Kodesh or not Kodesh? Ella says the Gemara, the Kul Alma Kodesh. Everybody agrees that when you makdish your Eved, the Eved does become Hektish. Here the argument in this Brais is as follows. The Mar Savar, the Tanakama holds, Avde Kimikarkoi Domi. When you makdish an Eved, the status of an Eved is the same as a piece of land. And as Rashi here brings in the Gemara in Me'ila, that says that regarding a karka that's owned by Hektish, there's no halach of Me'ila. It's learned out from Truma, just like Truma is not something which is connected to the ground, it's produce, it's tolush, it's detached. Same thing, Me'ila only applies to something that's disconnected from the ground. So therefore, Eved is like karka. Mar Sava, but Rav Shimon Gamliel says, Kimetalkali Dami, that an Eved is movable. True, he's not like regular movable items, but he walks around, so therefore he's not considered to be like a piece of karka. So that's the machlokes, whether the halacha of Me'ila applies over here. Asks the Gemara, Ihachi adamiflagi bisarai. So why are they arguing? Why is Rav Shimon Gamliel only arguing regarding the hairs of the Eved? He's saying that you might, if you use the hairs of the Eved, liflagu begufay. Why aren't they arguing bechlal? Rav Shimon Gamliel should be saying that the whole body of the Eved is metaltalin, and therefore there's Me'ila in every part of his body. Ella says the Gemara, the Kul Alma, rather we have to say as follows. Both the Tanakama and Rav Shimon Gamliel agree, Avde Kimikarkoi Domi. An Eved has the status of a piece of land, and there's no Me'ila regarding a piece of land. What they're arguing about is specifically regarding the hairs of the Eved, since the hairs of the Eved are eventually going to be cut. So Marsava, Kagozes Domi. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, true, the entire body of the Eved is like karka, but not his hairs. His hairs is going to be cut, so that's already like it's cut. It's destined to be cut. It's like it's cut, so there is Me'ila for this. Marsava, the Tanakama holds, Lav Kagozes Domi. It's not like it's cut. Right now it's still attached to his body, so there's no Me'ila for this, like his body itself. So now, according to this pshat here, whether the hairs are kegozus or not, the Gemara brings another braiser that discusses a similar subject where it seems like the exact same machlekes. So Leme, shall we say, Hani Tanoi kahani Tanoi. The Tanoim over here that we're about to quote is like, or the Tanoim that we just quoted here is like the following Tanoim that we have in another Mishnah. The Tanan, the Mishnah says, and this is a Mishnah that discusses the halacha of a person that has to make a shvuah. One of the typical cases of making a shvuah, menatayre, is maide b'miktsas. Someone demands of you $100 or $1,000, and you admit half. So then you have to swear for the other half that you deny, and that's the shvuah of maide b'miktsas. But there's a rule regarding a shvuah menatayre. There's no shvuah on karka. The halacha, it's learned out from a pasuk from a klal pratikhlal, I believe. The shvuah is only on movable items. But if the discussion, the argument in the dintayre is about a piece of karka, there's no halacha of a shvuah. So here the Mishnah says regarding this that Nan Rav Meir says, Yesh dvarim she'en kekarka ve'en kekarka. There are things that are like a piece of land, but it's not really like a piece of land. And ve'en chachamim maidim loy. And chachamim do not agree to Rav Meir. So there's an argument about this. So what are we talking about here? Keitzad. Eser gefanim tunois mesarti l'cha. In a din Torah, a person brings his friend to a din Torah and he says to him, I gave you 10 vines in a vineyard that were full of grapes, and I gave it to you to take care of and to watch for me. And then this individual comes and answers and says, no, you didn't give me 10 vines that had grapes on them. There were only 5 of them that had grapes on them. And so this is a situation of a pekadon that he says, I gave you, and he's only agreeing to half. The other half he says, I didn't have. So this is a typical case of Maida b'miktsas. Rav Meir says the shvuah of Maida b'miktsas applies over here. The Chachamim but the Chachamim argue and say, no, because the argument is about these grapes that were connected to the vines that is connected to the ground, so it has a halacha of karka. And as I mentioned, karka, there's no shvuah for karka. So what's the explanation of this argument? The argument over here is that if they would be arguing about a piece of land itself, for sure everyone would agree there's no shvuah. But they're arguing about these grapes that he gave him to take care of that are about to be cut. So that's what they're arguing, whether this is still considered to be karka. Rav Meir says because these are grapes that are becoming ripe and they're going to be cut, so it's like they were cut already. So therefore it's not an argument about karka. But Rabbanan Savri lav kibitzuris damya. When he gave it to him, he gave him the vines with the grapes still connected, so therefore it's considered to be that it was still connected. So we see here basically the same machlokes like we had before regarding hairs, where the hairs are considered to be like they're cut already. The same here regarding the grapes and the vine. Says the Gemara, you can't compare the hairs to the grape on a vine. Why not? I can tell you that the Rabbanan here follows even the opinion of Rab Meir. Why? When Rab Meir said regarding the grapes that it's as if it's already cut, why is that? Because grapes, once they get ripe, you leave it on the vine too late, so then it's going to get ruined. It's going to get destroyed there. So over here, there's a svara to say that it's as if it's already cut. When it comes to the hairs, the longer a person's hair is attached to his body, the longer it's going to grow. So over here, Rav Meir would agree to the Rabbanon that the hair is connected to the head is still considered to be part of the body of the person. Okay, now the Gemara returns to the original subject over here, B'nigeya to freeing a slave. Kisalak Rab Chir bar Yosef, when Rab Chir bar Yosef came to Eretz Yisrael, Omar lahoshmaite de Rav kamei de Rab Yechanan. So he said the halacha of Rab Yechanan, the halacha of Rav that is in front of Rab Yechanan. So this is going back to what I brought before in the Flamet Ches Amud Beis, that Rav said the halacha that when you free a eved, actually Rav said before, big chiddush, when you mafker an eved, you declare an eved to be hefker, so he goes out to be free. And then the Gemara before brought, but still Rav holds that after you declare him hefker, you still additionally have to give him a get shichra. Do have to give him a get. Let me just remind you again, a very fundamental point here regarding an eved. The ownership of an eved has two components to it generally. There's the monetary ownership, and then there's the isser ownership, his status of whether he's a yid or not a yid. Is he allowed to marry a bas chayrin, a regular Jewish girl, or not? So Rav said that you mafker eved, he goes free. And then additionally, you have to give him a get shichra. This was the statement that was said in front of Rabbi Yechanan. So when Rabbi Yechanan heard this, Amalei, Rabbi Yechanan said to Rabbi Chir bar Yosef, Amar Rav Hachi, did Rav actually say this? He was sort of wondering whether this is true. So the Gemara asks, why was Rabbi Yechanan wondering? Did Rabbi Yechanan disagree with this? V'hu loy Amar Hachi. Rabbi Yechanan doesn't agree with this. V'ha Amar Ola, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. But Ola said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, we had this quoted before, or actually the Gemara brings it later. Hamafker avdoi yotzel cheres, a person that declares his eved to be hefker. So that's not the usual way that you send away a eved. But over here he just was mafkerim. So yotzel cheres, he goes free, but v'tzarach get shichra. You also need a get shichra. So Rabbi Yechanan himself said this. So why is he wondering whether Rav said this? So the Gemara says, you're right, that's taka what he was wondering. Hachi kamale, this is what he was saying to Rab Chir bar Abba, or Rab Chir bar Yosef, sorry. Amar Rav kavasi, did Rav actually say, like my opinion? He was wondering whether Rav taka agreed to him. Vekadamri, others say that what happened was, loy saimua kaimei. When he said over what Rav said, he didn't finish the entire statement of Rav. So all he said was, Rav said, if you declare your eved hefker, he goes free. He didn't finish off the point that you also have to give him a get shichra. So Amalei said to Rab Chir bar Yosef, Rav tzarech get shichra. Rav didn't say that it's not enough to declare him hefker. You also have to give him additionally a get shichra, so he could go and marry a yid. Rabbi Yechanan, so here the Gemara says the reason he was wondering is because Rabbi Yechanan, Taimez, we just said, Rabbi Yechanan holds, Rabbi Yechanan, Mafka Avdoi, when you free a slave, Yatzel Acheres, he goes free, but Vitzarach get shichra. But after that, you have to give him a get shichra. So this is the opinion of Rav and Rabbi Yechanan. But we did have before in the Gemara, I think it was the previous blot, that Shmuel disagreed with this. Shmuel says once he's hefker and there's no monetary ownership that the master has, automatically the whole status of the slave changes and he becomes a full yid even without a get shichra. We brought it before from a pasuk. But Rav and Rabbi Yechanan both hold that no, hefker takes care of the monetary ownership that's now hefker, but then there's an additional thing that you have to give a get shichra for him to be able to marry a yid. So the Gemara now will focus now on this point here regarding freeing an eved. So this halach itself that Rabbi Yechanan said, Amma Ula, Amma Rabbi Yechanan, Amafka Avda Yatzel Acheres. You free an eved, he goes free, but additionally, Vitzarach get shichra. You have to give him a get to free him. So Rabbi Abba asked Ula about this halacha that he repeated in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. The Brisa says, Ger shemes, a ger passes away. So many times when this ger passes away, what happens is there's nobody that is inheriting any of his properties or possessions because he's a ger and he has no krovim, he has no relatives, so there's no inheritors. So all kinds of people may come to take from the inheritance that's left there. So Yidden came to plunder, to take from his possessions. Amongst them were also slaves that he owned. Ben Gedolim, Ben Ketanim, whether these slaves were Gedolim or Ketanim, these slaves, nobody can be Zeiche in them because they are Zeiche in themselves. The moment the master dies, they basically become Hefker. And if they become Hefker, so they're free. They're free for themselves, so no one can be Zeich in them. Abishal says, Gedailim kano atzmam. The Gedailim, since a person's a godly, is a bardas, so when he becomes hefker, he can be Zeich in himself. But the slaves that are ketanim, so they do not become free. Anybody that, again, I didn't read it right. G'dailim kano atzmo b'nei chaydim. That's how you read it. The G'dailim, they do acquire themselves to become b'nei chaydim. But ketanim, the slaves that are ketanim, they don't have das to be zeich in themselves. So kol machzik ben zacha ben. Whoever will grab of these slaves could be zeich in these slaves for himself. That's the Braise. Okay, so we have here the Machlokes, which the Gemara will focus on soon. But first, the point you see here from this Braise is when the master passes away and these avodim become hefker, what happens? They become completely b'nei chaydim. The Braise makes no mention of the fact that additionally you need a get shikhr. Like Rabbi Yochanan said, that even after they become free because of hefker, you also still need a get shikhr that they should be allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. That was a question of Rab Abba to Ula. So, okay, what? And a chanami, nobody, so they sort of would become stuck. Okay, let's see what the Gemara answers. So the Gemara says, first, so Rab Abba asks, V'chimi kasav get shikhr le'ilu. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you have to have a get shikhr. So who's going to write a get shikhr for these avodim when their master died? Omar, Ula responded to this question of Rab Abba, Domi haimed Rabbanan, this question that this Rabbanan asked is like a person that never learned a Gemara in his life. How could he ask such a kind of question? The time am I? Why did he say that he didn't accept this question at all? Rav Nachman explained, Kasava Ula, because Ula held, Avdoi de Ger, when you have an Eved that's owned by a person, in this case owned by a Ger, Ki Ishtoi. So that it's the same halacha like a wife married. Ma Ishtoi, what's the halacha of a woman that's married? Mishtalcha b'lo get. If the husband passes away, so we're not going to say that, her husband passed away, but she still needs a get after that. Once the husband passes away, she's an almana, she can get married to whoever she wants. Avavadav mishtalcha b'lo get. The same thing also when it comes to a eved, the misa of the odain completely frees the eved. You may argue and think that no, it's not so. Maybe just by a isha. The ishus is lost once the husband passes away. But no, Rashi brings, we compare, we'll see soon in the Gemara, we compare both. We compare an evet to an isha, we learn out law, we compare them to each other. And for this we learn that just like the misa of a husband, the isha is completely free. The same thing also, the misa of the evet, of the odain is going to be completely free. So you don't need any additional get. So it's not, you can't compare it to an odain that's still alive and is just being mafkir as evet. Says the Gemara, Yachi, if that's the case, a Fili Yisrael Nami, even a Yid as well, not just a Ger, any Yisrael that passes away, why wouldn't I say that all the Avodim that he owned automatically become free? Like you just said, you compare it to an Isha. So when the Adam passes away, they should be free. Why are we saying this only by a Ger? Answers the Gemara, Makra, no. Regarding a Yid that owns the Eved, the Pasuk says, that the Eved has to be treated like a piece of Nachla, like an inheritance, that the children inherit the Eved. He doesn't go free. So therefore, Eved is different. By a Yisrael, that is, it's different. Correct the Gemara, but still, even by Yisrael, Ihachi hamafkir avdai. A person that first declared his Eved to be hefker. Okay, so now, once he declares him to be hefker, so you can't say that his children would inherit his Evet, because he declared him hefker. But he's still not fully free. If you say that he additionally needs a get shikra, he's still not fully free. But then umeis, and then he passes away. So Nami, over here in such a case, you should say that not only by a ger, but by a yisrael. If the father, the master, declared him hefka before he passed away, and then he passes away, shouldn't the evet be now completely free? But if so, the question is on Ameimah. Why did Ameimah say in such a kind of a case, Hamafka Avdo Yameis, person first declared his evet hefka, and then he passes away, Oisei evet ein le takana. So Ameimah says, this evet is now stuck. There's nothing that can be done with him. Why? Because there's nobody that can give him a get shikhr. Because he's already hefka, so nobody monetarily owns him. So the children can't give him a get shikhr. The father passed away, so now he's sort of in a status where he could never become a full-fledged yid through a get shikhr. But the question is, why did Ameimah say that he becomes stuck? Didn't we just say we compare an evet to an isha? When an isha, her husband dies, the isha becomes completely free to marry whoever she wants. It should be the same thing with an evet. The only problem was that there was a monetary ownership over here, and there's v'hisnachaltam, it becomes a Yerusha. But not if the father, the master, already declared him hefker in advance. So therefore the Gemara says, Kashya. This remains a question on Dameim or Kashya. This question that we asked on Dameim statement, there remains a question. Now the Gemara goes back to the machlokes that we brought before in the Braisa regarding this ger that passed away and he had avodim in his possession. So again, the Tanakama said whether the avodim were gedolim, whether the avodim were ketanim, they acquire themselves. Abba Shaul says no, there's a difference. An eved that's a gadol could acquire himself. An eved that's a katan cannot. Now when you learned the Gemara before, it seems like the argument over here is whether an eved, a katan, has the power to be kain himself. Could maybe midrabanan there would be. I mean, he has no das. There's no way he could acquire himself. But it seems like there's a machlokes over here whether a katan could acquire himself. But as we'll see in the continuation of the Gemara, there's a different pshat to this machlokes. First, the Gemara brings Amar Rav Yaakov bar Idi, Amar Rav Yeshua ben Levi. Rav Yaakov bar Idi said in the name of Rav Yeshua ben Levi, halacha ka Abishal. We paskin like Abishal. That said that both Benigeya was again. Abishal was the one that said. One second. That Abishal was the one that made a distinction between the Gedolim and the Ketanim. Right, the Gedolim are kind of themselves, but the Ketanim, after the ger passed away, so then you can't again. The Gedolim, the Gedolim acquire themselves, but the Ketanim cannot. They cannot acquire themselves. That distinction that Abishal said, we pass like Abishal. Okay. Amalei Rav Zayde, Rav Yaakov bar Idi. So Rav Zayde asked Rav Yaakov bar Idi regarding this halacha, like Abishal. Befeidish mialach, did you hear this clearly from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that he paskin like Abishal regarding this distinction? Or you sort of deduced it from something else that he said, but he didn't say it clearly. My klala, what would be something else that you could deduce it from what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said? So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said as follows. Amru lufnei Rabbi, the halacha was said in front of Rabbi. Amat ya'ashti miploini avdi. If a master says, I give up of dealing with my slave. Let's say a person has a slave that's giving him a hard time, so he's miyayish from him. He says, I don't need him anymore. This is basically being mafkirim, as Rashi here says, right? Similar to what we're talking about over in the whole Gemara here. He was mafkir as Eved. What happens? Mahu, what's his halacha? Amalahem. So Rabbi said, I say, Ein loy takane ela b'shtar. He's not going to be completely free to go and marry a yid unless you give him a shtar shikhr, like we said before. That it's not enough just to declare him hefker. You have to additionally give him a shtar. That's what Rabbi said. That's what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi quoted in the name of Rabbi. Now on this, Rabbi Yechanan explained, my time at the Rabbi, what's the explanation of this statement that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said in the name of Rabbi? Gomar la meisha. Here the Gemara brings again this idea that the way Eved goes free is learned from the way Isha goes free. By Isha it says the term v'kasav law sefer krisis. By Eved it also says chuf shel nitin law. So we learn out these two things and we compare them. So ma Isha b'shtar, just like a Isha, how did she go free when she gets a shtar, which is the get? Af Eved nami b'shtar. So to a Eved, in order for him to be completely free, to be able to marry a Yid, he has to have a shtar. Not enough that his master declared him to be hefker. So now, this is what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, and Rabbi Yechanan explained what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, all in the name of Rabbi. So maybe from here you will medayik that the halacha is like Abishal, when the master passes away, that a gadol will be zeiche in himself, and a katan will not be zeiche in himself. Why? What are we medayik here? Ki isha. If we're comparing an Evet to a Isha, so then we have to compare to the way it is by a Isha. What is that? Ma Isha Isura v'loy memaina. Just like regarding a woman. What is the effect of a get? The effect of the get is only regarding her Isser status. Is she an Ashes Ish or not? V'loy memaina, a get that a woman receives from her husband has no effect at all regarding any monetary status. Af Eved Nami, so to when it comes to an Eved, Isura v'loy memaina. The effect of the shtar that you give an Evet to free him is only regarding the Isser status of the Evet, and it does not have any power to remove the monetary ownership. That doesn't relate to the monetary ownership of the master. What does the Gemara mean to say? So Rashi explains, when you free a Evet, which is a Gadol, so since he was already declared Hefke before, so now there is no monetary ownership at all here. So the get that you give him after he was declared Hefker, what is the get coming to accomplish? It's just coming to free him in the Isser aspect, which is that he's now allowed to go and marry a Yid. That's similar to a Isha, where the get is just coming to be mat to her to marry another man. But if you're talking about an eved which is a katan, the eved that's a katan, even after the master declares him to be hefker, the eved has no das to be kaina himself. So declaring him to be hefker, he doesn't become even monetarily free to own himself. So if you're going to have to give him a shtar shikhr after the master declared him hefker, that shtar shikhr is going to have to free him not only for the isser, but also for the mammon aspect. Right? So therefore, over here we see that Rabbi Shua ben Levi holds that since we're learning it out from an isha, just like by an isha, it works only for isser and not for mammon, by an eved, it's the same thing. If so, it comes out that by an eved, we make a distinction between a gadol and a katan. The shtar shikhr works only for a gadol, where it's coming to free just the isser, and not for a katan, where you have to free the mammonous aspect as well. So what the Gemara means to say is that it's the same thing before in what Abba Shaul said. Just like over here regarding a get, we're comparing the shtar shikhr of an eved to the get of an isha. The Gemara before said, when it comes to the husband passing away, or the master passing away, it's the same thing. The fact that an eved goes free and the fact that an isha is now able to marry anybody, we also compare the misa of the eved, of the misa of the adain that is, and the misa of the baal to each other. So therefore, just like over here, Rabbi Shua ben Levi is quoting the name of Rebbe, that the comparison is only regarding an eved which is a gadol, and the get and the shtar pertains only to the isser, the same thing is also before, in the opinion of Abba Shaul, that when the master passes away, so that koyach of the master passing away to free the eved is only regarding the isser, but not benegeh to the mammonis. So if it's a katan that can't be zeiche in himself when the master passed away, because even after he becomes hefker, but he still can't be zeiche in himself, you're going to have to say that the husband passing away or the master passing away causes him to both be free for the mammonis and for the isser. That you can't say. According to Abba Shaul, you can't say, that's what Rebbe is saying over here, that we can't, since we compare it to a isha, you can't say that the get or the misa of the adain affects both the isser and the mammon. So therefore, from here, he was medayik that Rabbi Shua ben Levi must have paskened like Abba Shaul, because Rabbi Shua ben Levi over here is comparing to an isha. And since we compare to an isha, both the get and the misa of the adain affects only the isser and not the mammonis aspect, and that's only by a eved which is a gadol, and not by a eved which is a katan. Okay, that's the pshat over in the scene. It's a little bit of a Rashi over here is not so clear, but that's the taich of the Gemara.
What's the Mameina by Isha?
Again, what?
Mameina by Isha.
There is no Mameina by Isha. That's exactly. That's the whole point here. When a husband's married to an Isha, there is no monetary ownership. It's just a wife. It's a kinyan that he owns her for the Ishus. That's exactly what we're saying. That just like by Isha, the get only works for the Ishus. The same thing also regarding an Eved, the shtar shichror, or the Gemara is saying the same. The misa of the adain only has an effect for the isser aspect of this eved, not benegeh to the mamoniziga aspect for the eved, and therefore in both cases it applies only to a gadol and not to a katan, because by a katan there's also a mamoniziga aspect that's still not free because he was never zeichen himself properly. So this was your raya that you hold like Abba Shaul. So the Gemara says not necessarily should you be medayik this way. You could maybe be medayik the opposite. But v'im klala, so says the Gemara. So, but if you're learning it out from here, you deduced it from here. So, what's the issue? Is there anything wrong with learning it out from here? Amalei. So he said to him, yeah, you can't learn out from here that Rabbi Shua ben Levi paskin like Abba Shaul. Why? Adarabe, because on the contrary, doik mina, you can be medayik from here leidach kisa. Compare an evet to a isha, and you can come to the opposite conclusion. Ma isha, I'll tell you as follows, just like by an isha. Ben Gedola, Ben Ketana, the get that you give to a Isha works whether the wife is a Gedola or whether the wife is a Ketana, Af Eved Nami, so too regarding an Eved, when you give a Shtar Shechra, Ben Godel, Ben Cotton. It works whether the Eved is a Godel or he's a Cotton, doesn't make a difference. Even though by a Cotton, the get is going to have to be used also to free the monetary ownership which the Eved cannot be Zeiche in himself, but nevertheless, on the other hand, we see the power of a get by a Isha is for a Godel or a Cotton. So we should say the same thing by an Eved. So therefore, Adarabba, this is not like Abba Shaul. That the same thing when a master passes away, his passing away can free both a Eved which is a Godel and a cotton. We should not make a distinction. We should compare it to the get of an Isha. So therefore, you can't learn out from here like Abba Shaul. Amalei, so he said to him, Beferish Shmieli, I actually heard clearly from Rabbi Shua ben Levi that he passed like Abba Shaul. I didn't hear it from this comparison that I made here, from the Eved to a get of a Isha. I heard it Beferish from him. So therefore there's no questions. Okay, the Gemara here now is going to basically review this whole piece of Gemara again, but it's going to bring sort of an opposite version how this discussion went. Rab Chia bar Abba Rab Yechanan, Rab Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rab Yechanan, Ein halacha Abba Shaul. We do not paskin like Abba Shaul that makes a distinction between the avodim that are gedolim or ketanim when their master passes away. We paskin like the Rabbanon that whether it's the gedolim, whether it's the ketanim, when the master passes away, they both are freed through this completely. So now on this, Rab Chia bar Abba asked Rab Chia bar Abba, Beferish Shmielach, did you hear this clearly from Rab Yechanan? So before we were discussing Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Here we're discussing Rabbi Yechanan's opinion. Did you hear this beferish from Rabbi Yechanan or meklolish mialach? Or you just deduce it from something else that he said? So my klola, what would be this that you could deduce it from? So the Gemara brings the same statement that we had before, which included both Rabbi Shua ben Levi and Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, the halacha was said in front of Rabbi, the sayashti miploini avdi mahu. A master that says, I give up from my Eved, so he was mafkirim, so what's the halacha now? Amalahem, and Rebbe answered, I say, Ein lo takana ela b'shtar. You're going to have to give him a shtar to free him completely. Rabbi Yechanan came and explained, my time of the Rebbe, what's the reason why he additionally needs a shtar? Gomar, lo, meisha, because you learn out the freedom of a Eved from the freedom of a Isha. Ma Isha b'shtar, just like a Isha has to be with a shtar. Af Eved, nami b'shtar. The same in Eved, we compare to an Isha that he has to be freed only with a shtar. Now, so how do we see from here that the halacha is not like Abba Shaul? That we compare an Eved that's a gadol and a cotton, when his master passes away, that they both get free. How do I see this? Now, the Kadaikis Mina, now you deduced from here, Ke-Isha, that I compare an Evet to an Isha to say as follows. Ma Isha be'gedayla ben ketana. Just like by Isha, the effect of the get for a wife is whether she's a gedayla or a ketana. Af Evet nami ben gadol ben katan. So to buy a Evet, the shtar shikra could be used for an Evet, whether he's a gadol or a cotton. And the same thing also, when the master passes away, the Evet gets free, whether he's a gadol or a cotton. Not like Abba Shaul. That's where you wanted to prove this from. Says the Gemara, so if I'm deducing it from here, what's the problem? Is it not a good diak from here? So the Gemara says the opposite svara, like we mentioned already before. Because I could prove from here the opposite. Doik mina. From this comparison of an Eved to a Isha, you could learn out from this, lahachkisa, learn out to this way, the opposite. Ma Isha Isura, just like by a get of a Isha. What's the effect of a get only regarding the Isser status, that she's not an Eishes Ish anymore? V'loy memaina. The get has no power to affect the money status of the Isha. There is no money connection, there's no monetary ownership that her husband has over her. Af Eved Nami, so too when it comes to a Eved, Isura v'loy memaina. The effect of a shtar when you free a Eved, and the same, the effect of the death of the master regarding freeing the Eved is only for the Isra status, but v'lei b'mayna, not for the money status. So if it's a katan that his money status was not yet freed, why? Because he can't be zeichen himself, and you want to use the get for that, you can't, because the get does not free the money status of the Eved. So Adarabi, you could be medayik from here like Abba Shaul, not like the Rabbanon. So Amalei, so there he answered him and told him, like we said before, the same thing, beferish mieli. I heard clearly from Rabbi Yechanan that the halacha is not like Abba Shaul. Okay, going back now to this statement here, which really Rabbi Shua ben Levi was quoting in the name of Rebbe. So Amamar, the master said before, Amalehem, Oimani, Rebbe said, I say, Ein lo takana ella b'shtar. When you free a Eved, he's not going to be completely free. In order for him to marry a Bas Yisrael, you have to give him a shtar shichra. So the Gemara asks on this, but Vatan, you had in a Braisa quoted before, Rebbe says that, Oimani, I say, Afhu noisen demei atzmai v'yaitze. That what happens if a master was makdish his Eved, so then the Eved himself could buy himself. He can't really free himself. He can't redeem himself, that is. There's no pidyon because his guf is not owned by the hektish. Pidyon is only if his guf is owned by the hektish, but his value is owned by the hektish. So he could buy himself from the hektish. Noisen demei atzma, he pays his value of himself to the hektish, v'yaitze, and he goes free. It's like the hektish is selling this evet to himself. So what do you see over here? That over here, it's mashma, Rebbe saying that he goes free when he buys himself from the hektish, and he does not need any additional shtar shichrur. And over here we just quoted, Rebbe says, after he's declared hefker, he does need a shtar shichrur after that. So the Gemara answers there's a difference. Hachi ka'amar, this is how we have to understand what Rebbe holds. Oy bekesef, oy bishtar. Rebbe's opinion is an Eved could become completely free even to marry a Yid, either by redeeming himself with kesef. When he redeems himself with kesef, the kesef has the effect to sever the money ownership and also the Isser, both. Oy bishtar. But if it's not with kesef, he's going to become free without kesef, then he's going to need a shtar. So over here, when Rebbe says he needs a shtar, the reason is because he was declared hefker. Once he was declared hefker, so he didn't pay money to redeem himself. So then you're going to need a shtar for him to become totally free. But in a case where he paid for himself to be free, the effect of the kesef is the same like shtar, that he becomes totally free. Rashi over here brings it in the pasuk, the effect of kesef.
Takes care of the Yisuda too?
Yeah, it takes care of the Isser as well, correct. Rashi says that you see in the pasuk when it says, it gives the two options for an Eved freeing himself, kesef or shtar, we see the Torah compares the two. Just like a shtar completely frees for her to be able to, or him to be able to marry into Klal Yisrael, the same thing is with kesef. So if there's no kesef, then you need a shtar. That's the case of hefker. But if there's kesef, it has the same effect as the shtar. As the Gemara here finishes off, ahai pakale kaspa. Over here, once he was declared hefker, there is no kesef. So therefore, that's what Rebbe said, that he's going to need to have a shtar. Says the Gemara, but this answer we said here, the opinion of Rebbe, this excludes of the following Tanya that disagrees with this, Rab Shimon. The Tanya Rab Shimon, Rab Shimon says, Mishum Rab Akiva. The name of Rab Akiva, that Kesef does not have this power to completely free an Eved, only shtar. Why? So the Brisa says, Yachol, Rab Shimon said, I would think, Kesef Goimeba, that Kesef could completely free a Eved, just like a shtar completely frees an Eved. So he says, no, we don't say so. Why? Because Talmud Laima, the pasuk says, V'hovdei loiniv dasa. This is talking about the halacha of a shivcha charufa. Shivcha charufa is the shivcha that is half free. She's a shivcha kananis, but she's half free and half not free. And she's married to an Eved Ivri. An Eved Ivri is allowed to marry a shivcha. Now someone else came and was mizana with her. What's the halacha if you mizana with an Eishes Ish? That's a full Yid. So then you chayiv misa. But over here, because she wasn't free yet and she's not a full Yid and she's not married to the regular marriage of a Yid, the halacha is that you just as malchus and you have to bring a carbon asham. That's it. And the pasuk there says the reason is v'havdei lo nivdasa, because she wasn't yet fully freed. That's the lashon that it says in the pasuk in the beginning of the parsha. But then, if you look at me here, you have the pasuk on the side. In the beginning it says v'havdei lo nivdasa, she was not freed. Oy chufsha lo nitan lo. Or freedom wasn't given to her. What's the difference between these two expressions? Havdei lenivdasa and chufsha lenitla. The difference is havdei lenivdasa refers to money, when a person redeems himself paying for it. Chufsha refers to a shtar. She wasn't given a shtar to free her. So here's the pasuk where it gives you the two options. But now the thing is, ura kala parsha kula. If you go down to the end of the parsha there, the end of that same pasuk, what does it say over there? L'loy chufsha. In the end of that pasuk, it says again, B'kairis tia, but lo yu masu. There the pasuk says that in this case there's no chi of misa when you were mizana with this shivcha charufa. Why not? So the pasuk finishes off ki loy pasha, because she was not given a get shichror to free her. Why didn't it not say, like it said in the beginning of the pasuk regarding money, that she was not given money to completely free her? It only mentions the shtar shichror. The pasuk mentions only the shtar shichror here at the end to tell you shtar gaimeba, a shtar fully frees her, then a kesef gaimeba. The kesef does not free her. So what the pasuk is telling you is not only like it's mashma in the beginning of the pasuk, that if let's say she only paid for half of herself and she only became half free, so then she's still in the status of shivcha charufa. And the end of the pasuk it's saying that even if she paid fully for her freedom, but she didn't get a shtar, she won't be free, because the money cannot free her. So therefore we see over here that Rab Shimon disagrees with Rebbe. Again, Rebbe holds either a kesef frees you fully or a shtar frees you fully. Rab Shimon holds no, only a shtar shikra can free an eved completely from the master. Okay, let's try to finish here the scene here. Here the Gemara is going to discuss who the halacha is like. Omer Rami Bar Chama, Omer Nachman. So he said in the name of Rab Nachman, halacha Rab Shimon. We pass like Rab Shimon that only a shtar shikra can fully free an eved, not the kesef. Rav Yosef Bar Chama, Rav Yechanan. Rav Yosef Bar Chama said the name of Rav Yechanan. No, ein halacha Rab Shimon. We do not pass like Rab Shimon. Ashkechei Rav Nachman by Yitzchak l'Rave. Rav Nachman Yitzchak found Rave, or to say Rabbe Bar Shilte. or Bashilis is the Gerse of the Bach, to have a koya pischa the Beit Tfilah. He was standing at the door of the shul, Amalei, and he asked him about this halacha here, halacha or ain't halacha? Do we paskin like Rab Shimon, or do we not paskin like Rab Shimon? Amalei, so he answered him, Ani aimer, I say, ain't halacha. We do not paskin like Rab Shimon. Now, the Rabbanan, the Rabbanan, when they came from the city Mechuzah, so they said, Amar Rab Zera Mishmei Rav Nachman, Rab Zera said in the name of Rav Nachman, halacha, that halacha is like Rab Shimon. When they came to the city of Surah, Ashkachtel Rab Chia Baravin, and I found Rab Chia Baravin, Amri Lei, I told Rab Chia Baravin regarding Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman paskened like Rab Shimon. Emily easy, Gufadov de Heichav. Tell me the story. When was it that Rav Nachman paskened like Rab Shimon, that only a shtar shichra could fully free a eved, even to marry a yid, but the money that a eved pays could only get rid of the monetary ownership, but can't fully free him? Where did you see that Rav Nachman paskened this way? So I told him, Amali, and he answered me that the story was as follows. Dahi Amse, there was a maid, Shivcha Kananes, to have a mother, Shchiv Mira, that her master was on his deathbed, about to pass away. So the Shivcha came to the master, Asya Bachya Kameh, she came to cry in front of her master. Omra Le, she said to him, Ad Emes T'shtabed V'Tezla Hi Yitzah. Until what point are you going to keep me as a maidservant for you? And she was basically demanding from him before he passes away that he should free her. So what did this master do for her? Shakal Kumsa, he took his hat, Shadaba, he threw it to her, and Amalan, he tells her, Zil Kani Ha, the Kani Nafshech. Here, this hat is yours, and with this, you should acquire yourself as well. What was the master really trying to do? So Rashi here brings what he was trying to do is a kinyan of chalipin. Chalipin is like when you give a person a handkerchief or any item, and you lift it up, and with this, you can be kind of yourself. So basically, he wanted the slave here, or the maidservant, to be kind to herself with the kinyan of chalipin. Also, so that was the story. And he passed away. So now the question is, was this done right? Is she free or not? Also, like Rav Nachman, so they came to Rav Nachman, Amalahu, Rav Nachman said, no, this does not take effect. She does not become free. Now, why not? So man the Chaza, people that saw this psak din of Rav Nachman Sava, they thought the reason is Mishum da halacha ke Rab Shimon. What he was basically saying is that the halacha is like Rab Shimon. So therefore, what was Rav Nachman really saying? The monetary ownership of this master may have been removed, because just like Kesef could remove the monetary ownership, Chalipin, which is a kinyan similar to Kesef, could also remove the monetary ownership. But the fact that she should now be fully free to marry a Yid, that's only with a shtar shichra. She's not completely free. So therefore, she's not yet free to go marry whoever she wants. That's what people thought Rav Nachman was saying. But v'loihi, it's a mistake. That's not what Rav Nachman was saying. Or rather, there was a flaw with the kinyan of Chalipin itself. It wasn't a good kinyan b'chlal. El mishum, the havale kelov shel makna. When you do the kinyan of Chalipin, so there's the buyer and there's the seller. Whose keli, whose handkerchief do you have to use for this Chalipin? It has to be the keli of the buyer, not of the seller. Over here, the master, the seller, selling the evet himself, he threw the hat for him, and he wanted the chalipin to work this way. I mean, in the Gemara Bab Metzia, it's a machlekes if you use the handkerchief of the buyer or the seller. And over here, it was the kalim of the makna, and we don't pass him that way. It has to be the keli of the buyer, and that's why the entire freedom did not take effect. Not just because of the opinion of Rab Shimon. He b'chlal is not free at all because the whole chalipin was flawed. So the Gemara concludes, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Achisai, Amar Rav Amnuna, Saba, Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Ashiyan, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Amnuna, halacha ke Rab Shimon. That we do paskin like Rab Shimon regarding this halacha, that only the shtar fully frees the evet. But the Gemara concludes, V'loihi, this is not the halacha, ain't halacha ke Rab Shimon, we do not paskin like Rab Shimon.